Okay, you good?
Got it. Yes, I am. Can you all hear me okay?
We're good now.
And I just wanted to thank everyone, Roxy, Sabrina, and Dr. Kelly, for allowing us to be here today in another wonderful session. Can you all see my screen? I just shared it now. It wasn't shared previously.
We can.
We can see your screen, but we can't see your face.
I see his face.
Okay. I think I can't do both at the same time. So
no, you're good. I think whoever's
more important than
spotlighting
my
on the
face.
webinar needs to spotlight you.
It kept moving around. Okay, so we're going to.
Okay. All right. And I'm going to go to slideshow here, and hopefully we can all see that. So as was mentioned, my name is Matt Kerouac, and I'm a senior director for EverFi. Here's kind of our brief agenda for today. We'll start with introductions. So at EverFi, the company I work for, what we do is we web-based critical skills programs with a social impact. The idea is to really help support schools and districts. I don't think of as the core content typically. We work with large and small foundations, provide all these resources cost-free thanks to amazing partnerships. One of our partners is the AAHTF Task Force, which provides funding.
So Matt, I'm going to ask you to stop sharing your picture, and because that will eliminate some of the bandwidth issues that you're experiencing. So don't show your video. Stop your video.
So I apologize for that. So as this, not sure if I said this before, what EverFi does is work with organizations to provide web-based resources around really critical social and impact issues such as health and wellness, financial literacy, and cultural literacy. We're able to do that through amazing partnerships like we have with the AAHTF Task Force, Derek Brooks, the NFL, and other organizations that I'll share in a little bit as well. Here's a full list of kind of what we provide. We're going to focus today really on our 306 courses. Most of you already know about the mandate. This is also a great hint for the trivia question that Roxy shared. If you didn't already see that, we are really proud of our tradition and partnership with the task force through many years now. I think going back to, I believe, 2016, if I'm not wrong, Dr. Kelly.
Yes, and you know what? When you're stop sharing your video, we can't see your screen now, where everybody has a black screen.
All right. Sorry about that, y'all. All right. Can we see that okay?
We can see it now.
Okay. And again, my apologies. I don't know what's going on with the bandwidth here. As you can see, we work closely with the task force, and there's a little hint, as I mentioned, on here towards the trivia question that Roxy had put in the chat earlier on. So we're proud of our partnership with the task force in their mandate and their mission to the state of Florida. Here's the current reach of our program. So this is data that Sabrina and I share regularly. So the idea is this past year, we were able to support providing 7,800 students literacy around 306 and African American history. Here's our overall reach through the extent of our partnership, over 36,000 students and 305 of our Florida schools. And then our exemplary districts really are the bulk of that. And the hope is to really, this is a resource that isn't just provided for our exemplary districts, but the task force, Derek Brooks, the NFL provide this so it's available for every school in the country. So all of our Florida schools can utilize this. This is a resource that's available to all of y'all. And then we mentioned some of our partners here. So this is what allows us to be a no-cost resource with one of our great funding partners. You'll see the task force is one of our main ones, Derek Brooks, and a lot of our major sports teams here locally. Additionally, we already work with a lot of your school districts. So in many of your school districts, this is part of your single sign-on. So you can access this, so your students can access this, and teachers directly through their SSO and Clever. And we're working towards providing that in ClassLink this year as well. So if you see your school district listed on here, they're already a partner with us, and you have immediate access to this right away through your existing SSO. I'll talk a little bit about the approach and then look at some of the resources as well. Hopefully my bandwidth is doing better now too. So a little bit about our partnership overview. EverFi supports the task force mission in providing professional development and instructional materials. So in addition to the resources here, I work with many of you all on here and colleagues throughout the state, providing professional development down with Marion Williams in Broward County and Dr. Scott in Miami-Dade, with Aaron Conklin in Duval County, and our districts all throughout the state. The idea is to really provide teachers access so they understand this material so they can then implement it within their classrooms. And the idea is to make something that's really engaging and fun and accessible for students. We create our resources with subject matter experts. Our main expert in this is Dr. Claiborne Carson, who is the curator for Dr. King's papers out of Stanford University. He provided most of the research as well as our advisor for both the 306 traditional course and then the continuing the story course as well. So now we'll look briefly at the resources. The first one is our traditional 306 African American history. The idea behind this resource is really to provide an overview of African American history. And the emphasis here is really on the Americas. So we don't go back into the African kingdoms and the wealth that was accumulated there. Really start with the period around slavery and the slave trade, look at Phyllis Wheatley, the Underground Railroad, and then progress forward through there. And really look at kind of a chronological history within the United States. Each of these are going to do a lot of primary source documentation analysis. So students are going to read literature in the language in which it was written. They're going to do some analysis of these. They're going to do some responses, really dig down into some of the social studies and ELA concepts that are really important. Here's a quick at a glance. So these are aligned to our Florida standards. Typically, we see this used in middle school, and we do see it used in some of the lower high school grades. It's about 15 lessons, each about 5 to 10 minutes, and really can be used however you want. So they don't have to use chronologically, but let's say that you're looking for something to really teach a little bit about the Harlem Renaissance. Students can go right to that module and learn a little bit about that. And then it's all self-paced. In addition to the data that we share back with the task force and our partners, teachers can track individual data for their students as well. Those pre and post assessments that are built in and also self-graded. Here's an example of some standard alignments. This is something my team can share back with you all. We have somebody that lives in every major city here in the state of Florida. So we have myself in Tampa. I have another colleague here in Tampa, someone up in Jacksonville, in Orlando, and then down in Fort Lauderdale area as well. And they service the entire state. Here's an example of the interactive maps. So this is students are looking at the triangular trade, the slave trade, and how this all came about. Looking at how this was integral really to the commerce of all the emerging colonies, and really was the foundation upon which those colonies built their wealth, and kind of explains those different pieces. Look at examples of primary source documents and text. So the narrative life of Frederick Douglass and the language in which he wrote it, the demands on the March of Washington. Students are going to analyze those, draw some conclusions from those, and then really the hope is, and the next course will show you, is relate that to kind of the modern day, which is kind of the 201 version of the course. And then culminates in a capstone activity. What this is really a scaffolded essay response that students take. So they're going to look at one of the primary source documents. They're going to be asked individual sentence prompt questions. They're going to answer those questions, and then they're going to organize those to a really structured, scaffolded method that's going to allow them to create a whole essay in response to these, looking at how the demands of March of Washington were outlined and met, and then what were some of the things that they're still not been addressed today. And students can really look at that and how it addresses their content. I think there was a hand raised. Was there a specific question, or did you want to do this at the end, Roxy?
We're
Just
asking
continue with your presentation.
Yes.
Go ahead, Dr. Kelly. Continue with the
gonna say-
presentation.
Mhm.
Okay.
Will do. Great, thank you. So next we'll look at continuing the story. And in this resource, really the idea is to focus on really that kind of counter storytelling. So looking at other examples of what are things that happened in the past. What are the stories that maybe students haven't traditionally heard about some of these, and how do they affect us today? So looking at kind of those contrasts between then and now and how these things are all connected. So explaining first what counter storytelling really is, look at Black history before slavery, the definition of racism. You can see Juneteenth, which we all know is coming up. How is that established, and what are the effects on today? Looking at some of those kind of affirmative action. I know Dr. Damien Thomas talked about the Voting Rights Act. What were some of the things that led up to that point? And then how does that affect us today? Looking at Black business titans. I have a colleague that lives in Oklahoma and was the only person that I knew prior to probably 5 years ago that was really fully versed on the Tulsa Race Massacre and what happened in Black Wall Street there. We've incorporated into this resource and look at Black contributions to medicine. I was fortunate as part of our company to take us all to Montgomery, Alabama, where we saw the statue of the Mothers of Gynecology that's there, and learned a little bit about that, which is also built in that Black contributions to medicine as well. So some really poignant and really topical information for students to learn about that they may not already have some idea before, and then some discussion points on how that relates to what's happening in our modern society in the United States today. Again, the quick look at a glance. Typically, we see this more as a high school course, although we have some uses in 8th grade. It's about 3 lessons. I'd say more about 20 minutes each for each of these topics as it goes through. And then again, we do have the standard alignments for all of these. The idea is to really get students thinking critically and really looking at and doing some deep analysis on these topics to develop their own opinions. We're not trying to put any ideas in any student's head or indoctrinate them as we really want students to learn about these factual information and then develop their own ideas on how this has effect and appreciation for the lives that they are able to live today. Again, some examples of those bridges, how the past affects our current society and what's the link between those. Look at the there's
Matt, you're breaking up again.
Last train to the standard. Oh, man. I'm so sorry. I don't know if they're doing construction or what, but I'm actually finishing up. So in the interest of, again, my apologies, because I know how frustrating it is to watch these types of presentations. I hope you all can hear me now. Again, I can see Brian and John. If I can just get a thumbs up that y'all can hear me. Okay. Okay, cool. All right. So lastly, and then we'll transition over to some colleagues that I've got to work with and will hopefully have better both access and internet than I do. If you do, I would love to kind of collaborate with you all and maybe redeem myself, if for lack of a better word. And so the steps here is love to connect with you. My information is there. Please feel free to reach out if I need to kind of reshare the important work that we get to do in collaboration with the task force and many of our school districts here in the state of Florida. So with that, I will turn it over, shut off sharing my screen, answer any questions as best as I can, but happy to follow up in the chats and in emails as well.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Matt. And if are there, I know it was probably pretty difficult to actually hear Matt, so we do understand that. And so what we want to do is if you have a let's snap, let's snap. We got through it. Matt's doing a great job. And Matt, you spoke about, I think as a part of your, I think that as a part, we have some other things that are going to be coming up, as you said, that's kind of talk about some of the things that you have done. And you talked about some of the other colleagues that you've worked for as well, that will come on after you. So again, if there are any verified questions, and I'm also going to open up to Dr. Kelly to have some feedback as well. Dr. Kelly?
Yes, there was a question, and I think this may pertain to a lot of others who are on, that they wanted to know, Matt, how can they, or who do they see in their district to get access? And then during one of their Cleveland actually found it. So what can we do to make sure that districts, should they see to get connection?
Yeah, they can typically reach out to their social studies coordinator at the district, or feel free to reach out to me, and we can kind of coordinate it all together.
Okay, great. There was one other question too, about charter schools. Do they have access?
Correct.
Yes, all schools in the state of Florida have access to this, regardless of their funding mechanism or charter, public, private.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. I think that we are going to be, what we'll do right now is we will for sure, let's go ahead and do the poll for this particular session. We're going to do it within the, we'll get it going in the chat, in the app here in a second, and we're going to get it going. So let's snap for Matt, and we're going to move over now. We're going to move over now to Dr. John Ream. We're going to move over to Dr. John Ream. Dr. Ream.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is John Ream. I am the curriculum specialist for social studies for Alachua County Public Schools. And today I'm going to be co-presenting with Mr. Brian Knowles from Palm Beach County Schools on going beyond the textbook, teaching about Black experience through the lenses of music, dance, visual arts, and psychology. So I do want to give Brian a chance to introduce himself before we get going, and then we'll get started. Brian?
Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Again, I'm here co-presenting with my brother John around Beyond the Textbook, teaching the Black experience through the lenses of music, dance, and visual arts. And John is going to really focus on the psychology portion of it. I represent the exemplary district of Palm Beach County, Florida. I serve as the manager of our office or department of African American, Latino, Holocaust, and Gender Studies, and also the manager of secondary social studies here in Palm Beach County. So we are going to jump in, but I need to be able to share my screen with everyone. And I think it's a host disabled screen sharing.
Okay, we're going to take care of that as we're speaking. We're going to make sure that we have, we're going to make sure that Brian Knowles has the capabilities. Can we make sure we take care of that now?
There we go, taken care of.
All right, awesome.
So John, take it away.
All right. So as we mentioned, we are looking at some sort of non-traditional ways, right? A lot of what we talked about today has been about history, and yesterday has been about the idea of history and African-American studies in history. And what we want to really look at is what are some of these other fields that we can bring into history, as well as what are some of these other fields where we can be teaching the African-American experience and be teaching African-American studies in these other courses, to kind of show this integrative look at African-American studies being more than just a social studies course. So next slide, please, Brian.
Yeah, absolutely, and John, I just want to also add to it as well, is that, in our classrooms, when we want to approach this topic of discussion, and integrating and infusing African-American studies, we want to kind of go beyond representation, right? So, I know we did beyond the textbook, But another thing that could be added in is beyond representation. And what I mean is that sometimes our impact as far as delivering that content can be amplified or completely diminished based on the culture and climate of our schools and sometimes the culture and climate of our individual classrooms and our pedagogical approaches with the content. What the purpose of it is that you can't only just engage students by just, oh, I'm going to just talk about your history, but it also talks about, building relationships, affirming those students, and taking an instructional approach that is also culturally sustaining for those particular students to get the highest level of engagement and optimal performance academically.
Kind of piggybacking on, yeah, what Brian just said, we've repeatedly heard, representation matters. And so one of those things we have to realize is representation matters has multiple meanings. One of it is that idea that the teacher is there being a role model for the students. We also have this idea of, who's telling the story is going to be the one that's determining the story. But the other thing is that we see sort of a lack of diversity leads to a lack of understanding of other cultural differences. Right. And so by having culturally affirming spaces and having culturally sustaining pedagogies, what we can do in the classroom is make sure that that this is winding up happening, right? That we have the representation and that the representation is mattering. I come from a school district that is about 35% African-American students, yet over 80% of the teachers in the district are white. And I say over 80% are white. That doesn't mean the other 20% are African-American. That just means 80% are white. It's less than 10% that wind up actually being African-American. And so what we want to do today is really explore an asset-based instructional approach to understanding our students, right? Teachers, especially white teachers, don't necessarily understand cultural differences between themselves and their African-American students. And so culture, society, media, whatever you're gonna call it, constantly exposes our teachers, our white teachers in particular, to messages of Black deficiency, of Black pathology, and of Black inferiority. And so today we're gonna challenge that deficit-based model, and we want to have sort of give teachers an unwavering belief in humanity and the potentiality of Black people, and especially their ability to transcend and not be defined by racial oppression. So let's look at some definitions here on the next slide.
And absolutely, and just before we move on, John, as far as when we're talking about, looking at some asset-based approaches, some of the things that I'm going to do towards the end of the presentation is, give some examples, specifically using something that's known as hip-hop pedagogies to engage our students. There's a lot of work that we explore here, and there's a lot of work that falls under my expertise as far as how do we use hip-hop culture and integrate that in the classroom, and most importantly, how do we use hip-hop and use rap music and lyrics from rap music to explore and engage students around teaching that history. So I'm just going to take over this one, John. So culturally affirming spaces, right? So one of the things that when we do a lot of professional development here locally in Palm Beach County, and even just doing observations, is that when we talk about schools and we even talk about the underperformance of some of our groups of students within school districts, we don't look at the structural dimensions that may create that underperformance. And what we found that within schools and classrooms is that we have an adult issue. All right, so it's a lot of the adult practices that have a adverse direct impact on the outcomes of some of our students. So this whole concept around culturally affirming spaces is what adult practices and behaviors acknowledge and proactively seek to affirm students' cultural identities. Right, we want to look at the identities and what students come from and who students are authentically and indigenously within the classroom, and use that as an asset. Right, we must understand that allowing students to be who they are and also promoting the idea of allowing our students to be the best version of who they are is integral to a student's positive concept. It is conducive for just making sure that we insulate or protect the academic and social well-being of students, while we're working with students to reduce what we know as microaggressions, micro-validations for our students, right? So pretty much what we're looking at in culturally affirming spaces And how do we construct and develop a school culture and climate, and also a classroom culture and climate, where students don't feel like their whole goal is to fix those students by not allowing them to be who they are, right? So this whole concept sometimes in public education, especially specifically dealing with Black students and students of color, is that we measure success of those students on how much that we can assimilate those students, but versus promoting the idea of allowing those students to be who they are, and allowing students' culture to be an asset within the classroom versus a deficit model, which John is going to explore. Culturally sustaining pedagogies, looking at asset-based approaches, where basically an asset-based approach versus a traditional model is where we view home and community culture of students as a resource or a strategy to bridge access to prevailing practices, right? So that whole concept can be language, colloquialisms, the music, style, dress, dance, and those concepts that those students have at home that can be brought into the classroom. So you want to kind of eradicate that barrier. So that whole deficit approach, again, like John is going to explore more in detail, is where the culture of the students have no value and need to be replaced with superior practices, which are usually kind of just operate under this title of standard practices. Within the classroom, using equitable pedagogical approaches, which is assignments and alternative assessments that measure multiple modes of intelligences, such as visual art, song, movement, leadership, persuasive speech, and other ways that students can express and demonstrate their mastery of content and information.
So what we're going to do right now is we're going to explore some areas of psychology to understand sort of how to overcome that deficit model, right? And there's a field of psychology that developed in the late 60s, early 70s called Black psychology, which I'm going to use a definition by Fairchild in 2002 of Black psychology, the body of knowledge that is concerned with the understanding of African-American life and culture, right? And so that's what we're trying to get at for our teachers, right? Coming at this looking at the way of, we want the teachers to understand the culture of their African-American students. And so personality theory is one of those really great places to start looking at this, right? If we look at Western theories of personality, right, we've got humanism, psychodynamic, trait behavioral theories, right? These are what you learn in your standard psychology class. If you're teaching psychology or if you've taught psychology before, there is, I just got a note saying there's no sound. Are you muted? Is anyone else having sound issues? Can everyone hear me?
No, I
We're
hear you.
good.
So
We're good.
Okay.
I think it's on that end.
Okay.
Whoever that is needs to check at the bottom of their screen and click on the X where the little sound is.
Just want to make doubly sure since that came across the chat there. All right, so I'll keep going up. My apologies. So we're going to look at sort of these different, or we look at all these different theories in sort of a standard psychology class, but we don't look at theories that come from an Afrocentric perspective. In fact, one of the things we see is that all of these theories that you see in front of you, these are from a North and Western European ideological perspective. They don't even represent the totality of European perspectives. Southern and Eastern Europe are basically left out of these theories, which have much more in common with Afrocentric values as they're closer and have had greater contact. Next slide, please. So what I want to look at with you real quick here is these are Afrocentric values right here. These are values that are more consistent with, quite frankly, lots of areas of the world than what we have and what we see in our classrooms. Do these look like the values of the average American classroom to you? To me, they don't, right? These are values that we don't tend to see. So let's ask ourselves another question really quickly. What happens when we integrate, not even all of them, just some of these values into the classroom? And so we're going to take a couple of minutes here. I'm going to go over 4 of these Afrocentric sort of values and how they relate to personality very quickly and look at them and see, well, what does this mean for the classroom? Next slide, please. So the first one is spirituality. In an Afrocentric view, spirituality is interwoven within all aspects of life. Versus, and this isn't, we can discuss First Amendment and separation of church and state. That's not what this is about. This is the general idea of spiritual life as being part of everything versus in a Western traditional sense, right? We pray only during religious services and religious times, right? And so I'm going to quote Lincoln and Miami, who said, "We cannot separate the spiritual from the mundane, and acknowledging this in the classroom can lead to strength, hope, meaning, identity, liberation, and forgiveness." So we see how we're bringing students up by allowing them their spirituality and their expression of their spirituality, which is a part of them all of the time through the classroom. Next slide. Is time orientation. Western Europeans are always looking at exact time. They're always looking at what's coming next. They're always worried about the future. So often we are not present in what we're doing right now because we're so worried about what's coming next and being on time and being to the next place. Individuals, though, with more of an Afrocentric time orientation, they're not worried about linear. They're worried about what's going on right now. The past in and of itself is as important as the present and is as important as the future. So that conversation the student is having with their friend, and they're focused on, well, that conversation, while they may not be listening to you for that exact second, doesn't mean that they are not listening overall. It means right then they're focused there. And so getting that student out of that and into a new present with you sometimes can be letting them finish the sentence, can be letting them express themselves, right? And so bringing them back into the present. If we're only worried about the exact times of the dictates, we're robbing our students of their ability to go back and engage more fully in the work when they're then in that moment, when they're in that present. And so what winds up happening is they're not worried about getting to that next thing. They're worried about getting this thing and getting this thing done. But the key to it is making sure that getting that thing done is sort of, our schoolwork. But we have to be cognizant of their time frames there. Brian, I know, is going to talk more in a minute or two about how making that work in the representation, right, and how getting them into the active now with you in the classroom is going to take place through hip hop in the classroom. So our next one we're going to look at then is going to be orality. Oral communication. This is really important in an Afrocentric view versus a Western view, which is written communication is the most important thing. In an Afrocentric view, oral communication is more important. So saying to ourselves, how exactly can we make sure that that orality is represented in the classroom, that we can judge students based upon that oral communication, based on oral activities? And then, because we know there is such a Western influence on it, taking those oral activities and infusing them into the student's ability to write, letting their orality make them better writers, especially if we're letting that orality, that oral expression precede the writing. So it helps them build upon their writing skills. And our last one then is going to be collectivism. Oh, next slide, please, Brian, is collectivism versus individualism. Collectivism is a culture, a cluster of interrelated values that emphasizes the interdependence of individuals, right? And so within this value system, children are taught to be helpful to others, to contribute to the success of any group they belong to. And that begins with their family. And we see this with our African-American students. So often they are helpful to a fault with other students, to the point where sometimes they're getting in trouble in class because of this helpfulness. But we can also use this in the class. I know a number of teachers who, when they incorporate groups into their class, the group is a family, and that's literally what they call each of these groups, is a family. And they foster familial interdependence within that group so that the students take responsibility for helping each other because they care about their group success, not just their individual success, right? Individualism is that fostering of competition, think in terms of valedictorian, salutatorian. Collectivism, though, is more collegial, cum laude, magna cum laude, summa cum laude, these sort of terminologies where everybody has the ability to be risen up. I'm going to go a little deeper into this in a few minutes. Next slide, please. So there are a number of different sort of major theories of Afrocentric. Like those are the background information on where we get Afrocentric theories of personality. And so there are a number of theories that have sprung from sort of those ideas. Wade Noble says his extended self. Naeem Akbar and his Divine Spiritual core model, Robert Williams, and Kobi Kamam. But I want to focus in real particularly on one of these because we don't have too much time today, and that's Wade Noble's and his extended self theory. So next slide. So Noble says that only in terms of one's people does the individual become conscious, right? So in terms of the group and understanding the group, it's we-ness as opposed to I-ness. And then he also says that there's this corporate self that says the definition of the self is dependent upon the group that the person is. And so this is the core of African personality. So what does this mean for classroom? Well, in the classroom, individual student performance has a positive effect on the overall academic climate and the self-concept of others within that class. It also means that negative performances can have an overall negative effect on overall student performance within a classroom. So just think, if everyone does poorly on a test, a quiz, on something like that, this could actually lead to spiraling within students. And this isn't just an African American thing, right? We've probably all seen this in some class somewhere. And so it's not just about African American students, it's about all students, and understanding there is a collectiveness and a want for collectiveness in all of us, and that can be used to help raise up all students within the group by thinking and helping each other, and by fostering sort of interdependence in each other. And quite frankly, the interdependence is going to help them work better together for creativity, for creative thinking, for collective efficacy. All right, next slide, please. And so this is sort of just another idea that sort of gets in here and brings it back to the idea of deficiency models, right? Which is, because it's a group self-concept, what happens is African Americans get a distorted view of themselves because of the oppression that is felt. And so this leads to overall and long-term psychological distress. And one of the things we've seen in like genetic research even is that intergenerational trauma is real and has long-term effects on individuals. And so it's not one of those things I hear sometimes people say, we can just get over. You can't get over. I mean, it's literally happening in people's genes to an extent at this point in time. And so one of the things we need to do is think about the African self-concept in such a way that we can lift students up and help students, right? And use psychology and use curriculum for that. So next slide, please. There are certain key components to the African self-concept. And this kind of moves us into the realm of social psychology and away from personality psychology. But you're going to see hopefully see some of the interrelated aspects of this, right? The historical past as well as the historical future and their relationship to our physical and our collective selves. This is where the future is tied to the past, and understanding of all the things come together, and individuals and group self-concepts really start to work together. And next slide. So in this, and is these ideas of race and racial identity and self-concept and who we are, right? These things are integrally tied to who we are as individuals. They affect our self-esteem, they affect our self-concept, and they're going to affect our identity. And there is such a thing as a racial identity that then winds up happening. And it's really important to understand the relationship among these concepts, as well as sort of the well-being of individuals, to understand how Black people can function across a number of different domains. So next slide. This is going to get us back to this idea of individualism and collectivism, right? With individualism, even when sort of one is in the group, there's still competition, there's still fighting, right? From a collectivist perspective, though, group activities need to be sort of on the group and not on the individual. And so teachers can't make group leaders. Instead, teachers need to let group leaders come naturally and be accepted by each other and by the group, right? By assigning a group leader, by assigning someone who's going to do maybe specific things, that doesn't always lead to the best outcomes for a best conceptual of a group self. For individuals that come from an interdependent culture. Instead, by allowing the groups to form, have longer term connections, and creating activities that are going to foster communication within the group. They're going to foster team building and synergy. Teachers can create activities that are going to build group spirit, foster creativity, foster thinking within those groups, and foster innovation. And these are the things that we're really trying to get out of students in education. I mean, it's great that they know, about ancient Egypt, but they can always learn about ancient Egypt again. They're going to forget a lot about ancient Egypt, but if they're learning these skills of creativity, of thinking, of innovation, then they're always going to have those skills, and then we can relearn ancient Egypt if need be. Right. So we're going to look a little bit about racial identity. Right, we know race in and of itself is an artificial construct when it comes to genetics, but racial identity is not. This is a full-fledged psychological phenomenon, right, where you have a sense of the group and the group that you belong to. And if you feel that you are not welcome in a group or not within a group, then you are going to draw away, right? You're not going to feel as if you are a part of that class. So racial identity is important because people look around a class and they see, are there other students like me? And trying to fit in. And we already know in a district like mine, where the majority of the teachers are white, they're already not fitting with the teachers. So they need to have some other students to fit in. But I mean, this can be a really good explanation as to why, if you have students in an AP class and they're the only African-American student in that class, they don't have that perception of shared racial history with everyone else. And this is going to cause that student to possibly draw back. So if we have then more Afrocentric curriculum built into these courses, this can then draw that student out. This is going to give that student an opportunity to share their racial history, their racial identity with the rest of the class. And so there are a few different models of racial identity. And as we can see here on this slide, I'm going to go into the first one, which is the Negressen's model of racial identity. But if you have the time, please look at the multidimensional model of racial identity and the model of white racial identity by Helms. They're really fascinating and can really sort of add to your understanding of the dynamics that are happening within your classroom. But Negressen's, which is on the next slide, has 5 stages. By the way, nigrescence comes from a French word that means the process of becoming Black. And so there are sort of 5 stages that African Americans go through, and we can internalize this as in the learning process of their racial identity, and thus in the learning process in general. And by fostering nigrescence in students, what we can do is help the student learn about themselves, help the students learn about their culture. And then through this process, the students are going to build self-esteem. They're going to build academic confidence and thus academic competence. And we're going to see classroom improvement, right? Those students who have already started to internalize, who've accepted who they are and are coming up with a proactive Black pride, we already see these are good students in the classroom. So it's helping them get to that next level, as well as helping the students that haven't gotten to that level to get up to these levels so that they have pride in who they are, in their racial identity, and then thus in themselves, and thus become better students. And that can be done through activities in the classroom, as well as through a curriculum that is reaffirming to who they are as African Americans. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Brian to talk about that curriculum.
Myself here. I didn't know you were going to be wrapped up that soon. I didn't mean to jump in there. But thank you, John. So, John mentioned a lot of things in there, making sure that we incorporate voice. And I even, had a couple of our presenters yesterday, talking about, really developing and implementing some strategies in the classroom that incorporate student voice in the classroom, that we're not just talking at students, right? I've kind of wrestled with teachers who are kind of stuck in that parameter of, PowerPoints and just using solely a textbook as your primary resource in the classroom. And one of the things also that John mentioned, making sure that we use writing, right? And sometimes we look at writing and reading as 2 mutually exclusive things. And allowing students to write is going to drastically improve reading skills, because there are so many different cognitive skills that take place when we're doing creative writing. And also using hip hop pedagogy as a way to really just build on the cultural aspect of collectivism within just that Afrocentric epistemology. All right, so today I'm going to kind of talk about a little bit and show some examples of how hip hop pedagogy can be implemented in the classroom, primarily using rap lyrics. I love hip hop culture. I am hip hop culture, right? And if you ask me, what was the first book that really sparked my interest and well, it kind of even shifted my entire trajectory of my life and really gaining that knowledge itself. It really wasn't a book. It was actually rap music. It was really KRS-One that kind of sparked my interest in just who I was, right? And as I started exploring hip hop and people like Tribe Called Quest and your Nas's and your Razzcast and other rappers that are probably not as well known, are those things that really sparked my interest and wanted me to explore knowledge itself. All right, so hip hop pedagogy, and a lot of people use it like hip hop based teaching and learning and so forth, but hip hop pedagogy takes hip hop based learning to another level, right? It's not based within it. It is completely incorporating the 5 elements of hip hop within your classroom, right? So the art and science of using the elements of hip hop is your pillars of instruction within the classroom. You're looking at DJing, looking at MCing, graffiti, b-boy, and just knowledge itself, which is the African American history infusion within the classroom, right? And you want to see some engagement. You want to allow kids to explore just their artistic self and be culturally firm. You know, these are some strategies that can be used to do that, right? So a sample lesson of that, and this is something that we can use, right? You know, just like I said, it was KRS-One, right? And one of the sample lessons that we've used, and we've done this with kids, and just like they love it, right? And most of them haven't heard of Boogie Down Productions or KRS-One for that matter, but it allows you to kind of introduce and also bridge that past or present, right? And using just a project-based learning approach, right? So looking at the You Must Learn song by Boogie Down Productions, and have the kids work in small groups in the classroom, and have them, you know, select one of the individuals that the author KRS-One mentions within this, right? And have them create and sometimes and give them the academic autonomy and creativity, right? To be able to either record a presentation about that person, or even if they want to present a digital story, which is a PowerPoint about that person. I've had kids who have drew pictures and done graffiti art in the classroom. We've even done assignments that we've seen and observed kids who have done creative dance to kind of demonstrate their mastery, right? So what they can do is just get a rap or spoken word or a poem. And I've even had teachers who say, I really don't like rap music or know it, that have done in this classroom, and their whole perspective of using hip hop and so forth has shifted, and there's some things that they have been able to learn from it. And one of the also things that we must understand, we're also using rap lyrics in the classroom, is that rap music, right? Quality rap music is some of the most rigorous and complex text that you can even imagine, right? Sometimes we're accustomed to what we know as standardized versions of curriculum and want to kind of run with that. But without understanding, you take certain songs from hip hop, and there's a lot of stuff. Even within this, you must learn, right? And even like the first couple lines of I believe that you're teaching history filled with straight up facts, no mystery, and all of those. You could take those couple lines, unpack them for days, and ways to incorporate and facilitate a particular lesson. Another example, and this one right here is more geared towards high school. And what we've done here is use this one right here as a way to introduce teaching the civil rights movement, for example. So what we've done is take 2 disparate authors, right, from 2 different eras, from 2 different approaches, right? Taking James Baldwin and his quote, "To be black in this country is to be relatively conscious, is to be in a state of constant rage." Almost all the time, and in one's work, and be part of rage is like this: it's only what is happening to you, but what is happening around you, right? Which is a famous quote from 1961 from James Baldwin. And one of the things that you also, when we incorporate this, is making sure that my generation of hip hop is going to be very, very different from what our kids are listening to, and making sure that we're incorporating what some of their artists from this generation also within it. So what I did is took Polo G and took that quote right there, and I'm not going to read all of it for time's sake, right? And just kind of taking what he said and was kind of bridge. What did James Baldwin say back in 1961? And what is Polo G saying in 2020, which this song came out, right? And looking at the connection between that time frame. So what you can do is do it once again, a collective assignment where the students will do some reference, research, and analysis, and look at, for example, what was the basis of the American Civil Rights Movement? And what was the civil unrest that happened in 1920 when Polo G wrote this one. In what ways are they similar? In what ways are they different, right? So you're incorporating a lot of critical thinking and analysis skills within that. If you kind of go down to the third one in reference and research, what are some specific results of both historical events? What kind of legislation was passed? What are the social, economic, and political impacts of births to approaches? Then you can incorporate things like a Socratic seminar, right, where the kids can have conversations and get into some in-depth discussions, discussing things like looking at the social progress of the United States, that what kind of social progress have we made since the 1960s, draw a comparison between the words of Baldwin and Polo G, and discuss why or if any additional progress is made in society, right? You be the kids to be critical thinkers and be independent thinkers. And also allowing the kids to develop potential solutions that they believe that can be viable to address some of the issues that may arise during the classroom from that discussion, right? So this is a way that kids can incorporate voice. These are ways that kids can incorporate the indigenous agency. These are ways that, like what John spoke about, affirming that psychology, bringing in some of those Afrocentric values and approaches and epistemologies also within the classroom. And I just want to kind of discuss, we can take a deeper dive, and this is what some of the resources that we can use throughout the state of Florida. I've personally written a series of courses, 5 courses that are actually available in CPOMs that can be used to further explore African American history. 2 of those courses is examining the African American experience in the 20th century through music and visual arts. And my favorite course of all time, which is passed, but I think I got it passed in 2018, exploring hip hop as literature. And the framework for the exploring hip hop as literature course that we have here is looking at the introduction and origins and the evolution of hip hop, the growth and the commercialization of hip hop, looking at things like identity and social activism, knowledge of self, the women of hip hop and feminism in hip hop, looking at Queen Latifah, looking at MC Lyte, looking at people like Rhapsody and using those lyrics to decode what is feminism and how that women combat the misogyny that does unfortunately exist in hip hop. Looking at the Latinx influence in hip hop, because you must understand that hip hop is something that was a true creation of the African diaspora, which was birthed out of those poor communities of the South of the Bronx that were mostly saturated with African Americans and people of other African diaspora, and also people from Latin America, Puerto Ricans and Dominicans and so forth. Looking at social activism in hip hop, looking at the healing power of hip hop as a theory of narrative, looking at some STL, and allowing kids to get into some creative writing about the art of storytelling in hip hop, looking at people like J. Cole, Kendrick Lamar, Slick Rick, and looking at the way that they constructed and telling stories by using rhymes and doing lyrics. And just like I say, hip hop and rap lyrics is the most complex art form and some of the most complex and rigorous text that you can possibly use within a classroom that can engage students, right? And also allow students to be affirmed, because this is part of their culture and part of their identity and who they are, right? So back on you, John.
You were a little quicker than I was thinking you were going to be. I was looking to answer some questions. Okay, so we want to spend the last little bit of our time then talking today about Black mental health, because that is another thing that really affects students within the classroom. And as a former psychology teacher, I think is a really important thing for understanding how our African American students are going to be in the classroom. It's affecting them in the classroom in a variety of different ways that we don't always think about or take into account. African American students, because just by the fact of them being Black, experience more severe forms of mental health conditions due to unmet needs, due to other barriers that are happening in society. We've heard about this from, just think about the voting rights presentation we had earlier on and the barriers that are happening there. These barriers are happening throughout all of society. And so their mental health needs are going unmet. 20% Blacks are 20% more likely to experience serious mental health problems than the general population. These numbers also are pre-COVID, so this could be even worse now. I really do need to update that a little bit. The other thing that's so important and so problematic is that, and we're thinking in terms of cultural values, is that the number of therapists and to help with mental health issues for African Americans is not that large. And so many African Americans do not necessarily want to go to a white therapist who does not understand them culturally. And as such, their willingness to get, I'm not saying willingness, that's a bad word, actually, I apologize. Their ability to get help is somewhat negated there, right? We also see Blacks are more likely to experience mental health conditions that then are going to lead to things such as homelessness, exposure to violence, and maybe not seek help for those things as well. And so these are all going to spill over into our classroom and with our students. And so we have to be cognizant of those. Let's look at our next slide. And these are just some real statistics that hopefully are sort of eye-opening, and understanding that no matter what school you're in, this is probably happening in your class, right? 13.2% of Americans identify as Black, right? Of those, over 16% had a diagnosed mental illness in the last year, and I believe that was from 2014, right? So what we're talking about is 6.8 million people, right? 6.8 African Americans, 6.8 million African Americans have mental health issues, whether they are your students, whether they are family members, and all of these things are external factors that are being brought into the classroom that they don't necessarily have control over, and are going to cause an impact on them in the classroom, right? And so, as you can see from the other side, this is more people than Chicago, Houston, and Philadelphia combined. And I'm saying all this to say, the more we bring in and think about Black psychology, bring Black culture in, bring things of interest into these students, the more that we can help these students, that whether it is get them away from the deficit model that they are seeing and or feeling, or whether it is helping them to see the need to, or helping them to identify with us so that we can help them see the need to get treatment, to get help if they do have a mental health issue, right? So that they're identifying with the curriculum, that is, even if you are a white teacher, right? And I see one of the panelists just said such a great positive impact. Yes, this can have a really large impact on these students, and it can be really beneficial for so many students that are in need and are crying out for help, and we don't always see it because the cry out for help might be in ways that look to us like bad behavior. All right, next slide, please. All right, we talked about barriers to voting before. Here are some barriers to service utilization for African Americans, right? They're inaccessible. They might not be able to get there, just like they might not be able to get to voting. There's a lack of cultural sensitivity within the field of psychology, right? Students who are African American may not go to their school guidance counselor because there's not a single Black guidance counselor in the school, so they don't feel like there's a single guidance counselor that knows and understands them. And that is directly the next one, which is a culture of mistrust when it does come to mental health, right? There's the general feelings that we have within anyone who is looking for mental health and has mental health issues: fear of being out of control, fear of being viewed as vulnerable, or weak, right? Or not wanting to let other people know this or disclose this, right? And so if we can help break down some of these barriers within our classroom, then these students who might need help are more willing to share with us. And I'm not saying we're to be their therapists or anything, right? But if they open up to us to an extent, what winds up happening is we can help them get those services that they need, that are culturally sensitive, that are relevant to them, and break down those bonds of mistrust. Next slide. All right, so implications in, right? It's important for therapists. I know we're not therapists, but I think we can all take lessons from this. And so this is directly, by the way, from a Black psychologist who I was working with a couple of years ago. These were her exact suggestions to us as teachers, right? Place our Black clients, in this case, students, right? Experiences within the sociocultural context. And that's sort of the point of everything Brian and I have been saying, right? We need to look within the sociocultural context for our students, right? We need to have an understanding and some knowledge of African American history and culture. We saw in the very last presentation, EverFi 306 is a place where some of us can begin to get that and to give that to all of our students, right? Be more interpersonal. There is such an interpersonal nature to Black culture that I don't even have it in white culture. And I admire how even in every single email, the way Brian greets me is so much nicer than I ever do in emails because of the cultural background I come from. And so I have stuff that I know I need to learn about the interpersonal and collaborative from that Afrocentric view, right? Come at this from, just like the curriculum, a strength-based, an asset-based look at African Americans. And then we need to, especially as white teachers, examine our own biases and our identity, our power and privilege, and see where those things come from so that we can be a little more understanding of our students. Because as one of my students said a few years ago, she had never had a single Black teacher in her entire elementary through high school career. And so my talking about Afrocentric views in psychology was the first time really she'd had a Black perspective, and it was still by a middle-aged white man. So looking at these things and our biases and our power and our privilege can help us to help our students when we may be the white person, but we're also going to be the person who can help foster that nigrescence model within our African American students, as I mentioned earlier.
And just to add to that, John, and a lot of what John is definitely expressing to you all and articulating is around just decentering ourselves sometimes when we're there to approach our students. Understanding even our education, our teacher training and so forth with approaching this, even with our attempts to infusion, is usually done within a very Eurocentric frame of reference when we do it. That's why I always say that we think that just that basic representation is all we need to do. One of the things that I've referenced to Dr. Malefe Asante is that we must understand that after integration, Black children and other students of color went into what we know as a borrowed space. It was a space that wasn't intentionally designed for those particular groups of students. That's the curriculum, that's the approach, that's the whole model of education, right? So it takes more of a transformation of how do we set up and facilitate that overall environment for those students to make sure that they're affirmed. It can be something as simple for some of the examples that we've discussed, like hip hop pedagogy. I'm kind of simultaneously controlling this, presenting, listening to John, watching the chat. And as soon as we talked about something like rap music, for example, a chat room lit up, right? Because people understand, because we felt affirmed as adults because these are things that we remember from our childhood, our college years, or whatever it could be, things that come from our culture. And it makes us engage and slant forward because this is something in familiar language to us. So just imagine the impact, right, of making sure that we incorporate the authentic interests of our students. Is hip hop something that is entirely engaging to all Black students? No, because we're not a monolith of people. But it's just making sure that we're being completely intentional of incorporating the interests, the culture, and affirming the students for who they are versus this assimilation model which standardized education wants us to take in our classroom. And I think that's it, John. That's the last slide. We got through them all.
Yes, sir.
All right, my brother.
So,
I guess that's some Q&A time or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yes, you got that right. It is Q&A. You know, you all started and opened up a whole can of new things, especially with the hip hop. You brought back memories for me in my days growing up in New York. Because all those people, boy, I feel old. I remember when KRS-One and all those guys started. I mean, I was at the beginning. But there are a couple of questions if you look in the chat and if you will look in the Q&A, there is one particular question asked, is there a book or report that our participants can come in or have access to? Do you have any suggestions?
Say it again, Dr. Kelly.
One more time. One of our participants want to know, is there a book or report that can be utilized so that they can read or utilize in their classrooms in the psychology area and in the hip hop area? So that's two different answers.
Okay, absolutely. I have some stuff, and I know Sabrina had emailed me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to send some stuff over to Sabrina. some resources. I have some articles about how to incorporate hip hop in affirming. I know one of the great books that we've used as a supplemental resource for the Exploring Hip Hop is Literature course is Can't Stop, Won't Stop as a textbook. But I definitely have other resources which I will share afterwards. Yeah.
So the simplest and the first and one of the best books on Black psychology is actually the original book, Black Psychology. There's also a great one, Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, America's Legacy of Enduring Injuries and Healing. And both of those are some really fantastic places to get some really good background in what is Black psychology. I can also send to Sabrina a couple of other research articles that I know are free that we can put online for everybody to use as well. I have those on my work computer, and I can grab those tomorrow.
No worries, but would you guys mind putting in the chat at least those two references, so that people have immediate access, because they're eager. They might even go to Amazon and order it right now. You never know. So with that being said, I think there were a couple other questions. Sabrina, did you see any others? What about you, Roxy? Any other questions? I was so enthused with the presentation. Thank you, guys. It was great. I'm like you, Roxy. We need to snap it up. I don't know. Back in the day, we didn't necessarily snap it up, but we did other things to say it was all right with me.
What did you do back in the day, Dr. Kelly? Show us. Let me see. Show us, Dr. Kelly.
Now
Let me spotlight you.
You
Let me
don't need to
spotlight you.
know. You don't
Show
need,
me.
you don't,
Show me
you
what
don't
you
need
used to
to.
do back in the day.
So when the hip hop started, and I grew up in Queens, so I mean I understand, and it can tell the words. And one of the things as an English teacher, I used to ask my students to take some of the literature from the Harlem Renaissance and put it to the music and the beats of their own choice, and you'd be surprised of the stories that you get. Thank you.
Y'all see that? Did y'all see it? Did you see that energy coming out of Dr. Kelly? Oh my goodness. Snap, snap. What an amazing presentation. Sabrina, do you want to ask some of the questions out the Q&A? Would you like to do that? I saw that there were some. Would you like to do that? Are we gonna?
I did answer some.
Okay.
So these ones that are in there now just popped up. So give me a chance to look at it.
Okay, Sabrina will be looking at those and getting those, and let's again, just last words, we will ensure that we are getting this information out there. And as a reminder, all right, so are you ready, Sabrina?
Okay, there was a question about someone didn't catch the Soul 7.
Repeat that question again, Sabrina.
Yes, someone was asking about the Soul 7, I guess in the presentation. They didn't catch, I guess, the name or more information in regards to that particular part, Jennifer Daniel. The question was, I didn't catch the Soul 7 broke up, and that's all I got. So Jennifer, if you could put that question more specifically, your question in the chat, I'll make sure it gets answered.
And while we're doing that, we have one question that's pretty specific, gentlemen. How do you get students to feel comfortable and open up to a counselor? That's a pretty specific question, and maybe one or both of you have a response to that.
I'll throw a little bit in there before John says something. One of the things that we're short of, just like we're have this cultural dissonance because most of our teachers are not Black teachers and look like our students. It kind of goes the same thing for mental health therapists and counselors on campus as well. And also, I've even introduced really taking some unorthodox approaches. Sometimes we look for those these professionals that come in, but sometimes we need to take, use and utilize people within schools that have relationships, existing relationships from the community as well, in our schools to really allow our kids to engage. You know, we have a strong distrust, you know, and Black folks, especially some of us from the community, it's valid based off historical receipts. So just using some people to have pre-existing relationships and making sure that we have, you know, capacity building with mental health counselors and being intentional about making sure that we have that representation as well to mitigate some of the cultural dissonance with mental health counselors and some of our students.
Thank you. Thank you. John, you have something?
Following up, if a student is actually willing to come to you and speak to you about issues because you have already opened up about mental health with them, right? And they are African American or whatever other group, and they're concerned. Letting a counselor know about those concerns beforehand, I think, is a really important thing. They are trained mental health experts. I know we don't always see it or think of it in schools because so often they are scheduling classes and dealing with testing, you know, and unfortunately they get misused so often, but they are trained mental health experts. And one of those things that's important is reminding them that this student is coming to them and the student has these very specific needs. Can either A, help the counselor know that's coming, or B, let the counselor know that maybe they're not the best person, so that some other counselor could be, if there's not one at the school, some other counselor could be brought in. Most of our school districts are large enough that you know, mental health counselors can be brought in and can be of greater assistance to individual students in those regards if necessary.
Thank you so much again, gentlemen. What an amazing experience. Let's snap it up. Let's talk about some of our takeaways in the chat. We're actually going to put up the poll. And as a reminder, the Q&A section is for questions and answers. But if you have a comment, we'll put that in the chat section. That'll give us a more clear delineation of a question so that we can answer those and so that our speakers will right away be able to tell that it's a question. Again, the Q&A section is for question, and the chat section is for just our comments. And so again, thank you, gentlemen, for an amazing presentation. Thank you for that. And we're going to, as we said, we're going to have the poll up momentarily. The poll will be launched within the app. And so now we're going to move on.
Before you move on, Roxy.
Okay.
Ms. Hall,
Yeah.
Hi, all right, Dr. Wright, here we go.
Yeah, I was able to go to my presentation and come back, but I heard the question about how you build relationships. Now, you know, it's vitally important for people to really build relationships with their students. I mean, you can't look at them as just a kid across the block. It's my student, so you got to get to know your student. And many times, if you build that relationship, the students would be very open and honest with you, very candid. And then when they can't, if they spend more time with a student success coach, that person in the school system may be able to assist in whatever issues the students may be having. I just left speaking to a number of student success coaches. So that's another avenue you could use in the school system when you need to get to some of these young people. So use the resources that are available to you, because they could certainly make a difference.
Thank you so
I'm
much,
sorry, Ms. Hall, I just wanted to add that, because, you know, I worked with students for years, even at the university for years and years, and had real good relationships with them. But, you know, they saw me somewhat as a father figure, but I was open with them and honest with them. And they saw me as a person who was caring and compassionate. And when they had to communicate, they brought their problems to my office.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And it's great to see your face. Oh my goodness. It's great to see your face in the place and the energy that you bring to the experience. And so we're happy that you're part of this afternoon. We're happy that you're part of this afternoon.
Yeah, I heard some of the other sessions earlier from the Museum of African Art, but I was trying to get ready to go speak to these students, the professors in the school system. So I rushed back to see can I get on this call so I could hear our last few minutes of what happened, because I told them we were in a 2-day session, and I had one eye open, one eye closed, because it's been a real busy 2 days, but it's been a phenomenal opportunity to really learn some history and to be inspired in a lot of other ways.
Well, with
I
that
have, and
wealth of, oh,
I have one question, and this is for
yes,
John. And since
okay.
he's the psychologist, and you kind of alluded to this in your statistics, and I hope you do update those to include some of the statistics that come out of COVID-19 and out of the COVID pandemic. Many of the students that we see now are prone to violence, as we can look at the massacre that just really happened, where students were being attacked. What can we do as educators in our classrooms to allay some of those fears if they don't want to tell a psychologist or they're not sharing with their parents as to what's going on? Because not only the children are affected by this mental health issue, the adults are as well. Is there anything that we could do or a piece of advice that you would like to give us?
First, let me start by saying I am not a licensed therapist in any way, shape, or form. So this is simply the advice of someone who teaches psychology and is a teacher. And I would say, if you can get those students to open up to anybody, that's the first key. A friend, another teacher that doesn't have to be you, another teacher, yourself, a counselor, anybody they're comfortable opening up to. There's your first step. As long as that person is willing to open up to that one person, the likelihood in the future that they're more likely to open up to others, to share with others, to get help from others is going to grow. And so the more people you can sort of just get them to talk to, and we see this, I mean, throughout the world where there is not mental health counseling like we see here, opening up to friends, family, a religious leader, any of these things can really help and can help a lot. So I'd say there's the first step, and that communication is going to grow and build from there.
Thank you so much. And this one is for Brian. You know, many of the teachers still in the classroom, and they're probably going to be retiring soon, but they didn't grow up with hip hop culture. So a lot of times when they hear about hip hop music, they automatically turn off, and students aren't willing to get into it with them. So if they were to have a workshop, and we've asked some of our participants have asked that we put on a workshop like that, we have the content that you both have offered today, what would be the first thing you would tell a generational teacher like myself about hip hop? Brian, has he left us already?
He's not on the screen right now. He's not on the
Okay.
screen right now. Did you see the question about the Black psychology books, Dr. Kelly, that's in there? You want
Yes.
to read that one out?
And I think John already answered it. He said the
He
fourth
did, okay.
edition. Fourth edition was
Okay.
was the latest one, John? Was that it?
Yeah, my apologies. I replied in the chat directly and didn't reply in the Q&A section.
Mm-hmm. Right, the fourth edition. So hopefully, I'll say this to the group. I think hip hop is here to stay. It's already shown that it's been going on all this long time, because all of those guys that he mentioned at the beginning, KRS-One, you know, Boogie Down Bronx, Sugar Hill Gang, they're all old men now. So it's fair to say that hip hop is here, and that it's a form of artistic expression. So I think that is one of the workshops that we probably can look at as a form of delivery for educators if they're interested. So if you're interested in having a workshop like that encompasses your students and yourself, let us know. Send us an email. Reach out to us. You can put it in the chat right now. If you think that would be something that's beneficial to help us understand, because I know in the beginning, a lot of people couldn't even understand what the people were saying. But if you look at the literature, you look at the content, it has some very powerful words and some life lessons. So if you're interested, let us know. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kelly. What an engaging conversation we just shared. If anybody got anything out of that, just say something about it. Snap, snap. Thank you, gentlemen, and thank you for that great co-presentation. That was a great energy to that as well. And so, Sabrina, I'm going to ask you, did you have any final giveaways? I know that we have that section. I wasn't sure if you had any more questions or any more books. I looked at that, but I just want to make sure I gave you that opportunity if you want to say anything else about your final giveaways.
Thank you, Roxy. Yes, what I'm doing now is tallying up all those wonderful replies from this session today. And I will be in contact with all the winners in the near future to let you know whether or not if you are a winner of our featured books during this institute.
Thank you so much, and thank you for your hard work. We're going to be moving on to one of our final sections, and I'm going to welcome one of the very active members here at the task force, Mr. Matthew Bloom.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. I knew when the workshop was being put together and I was asked to do a little overview of resources that I was in trouble after I had to follow up John and Brian's presentation, but then also be the person in between us and the closing remarks after 2 wonderful days. So hopefully I'll be able to wrap up a little bit and give everyone a reminder around some of the resources that have been shared and some of the things that you have seen over the last 2 days. Pinellas County Schools, which I work for as a content specialist, has maintained its exemplary status for many years now. And that recognition is quite an honor. But it's, as I reflect on that recognition, it's never been as a job or mission completed, but as a constant reminder that we can and need to continue to do better and improve our practices and our work around the infusion of African-American history into our curriculums. Every year that I attend these institutes, I leave energized, and I hope that you will too. As we wrap up this gathering, we think about where we're going to go. We have our notes, we have our thoughts, we have the energy and enthusiasm to continue that infusion into the curriculum. And so we likely go back to our schools, we go back to our districts and our colleagues and tell them, hopefully, about the great experience that we had these past 2 days. When you go back and have those conversations, wanted to make sure that you remember to find your way back to our large advocate and support system, which is the Commissioner of Education's African American History Task Force, and that task force website, which I'm going to put again one more time in the chat for everyone. And so what I wanted to make sure that we were able to do, and as I share my screen, hopefully I'll do this right. But I wanted to share my screen so that everybody can see it and focus everyone's attention back on the African American History Task Force website. All right. And what I wanted to walk through is showcase first and foremost is the homepage. You all had made your way here and through the Summer Institute portal so that you could sign up and be a part of this experience together. But it's also a place where you can find the mission and vision and stay connected to news and events. It's where, if you don't have an Instagram, even though Dr. Kelly's recommending that you get one, or a Twitter, you can always come and find an Instagram feed or a post so that you can stay connected to resources, information, upcoming events, our Task Force Summer Institute. It's where you can stay current and up to date. Whenever I meet with teachers or we have conversations about what do we do next, the starting point is always this website. And I hope that you'll make sure that you bookmark this website for future use and for future reference. One of the things I wanted to highlight again for you is the Task Force Summer Institute page. All of these recordings or all of the sessions have been recorded. And this is the one central site where we can continue to go to reflect on what we've been able to experience the last 2 days through all the sessions and the speakers. We'll be able to connect with the resources that they share with us. So make sure that you bookmark the website and that you come back to this after this event is over so that you can continue to reflect on the sessions and what we've learned. One of the things that I also wanted to highlight on the website, in case you're thinking about how do I infuse this or where do I go from here, in the About section, you can access that statute that's been mentioned multiple times. And you can also access directly the instructional standards guides that Dr. Coggan shared with us yesterday. So if you weren't able to download it or you're wondering where you can always access it, it's always here on the task force website. Exemplary status was something that Dr. Austin had talked with us about yesterday. For those of you who may be district leaders or a passionate educator within a district that is not exemplary status and looking for a place to start, you can go here to see the criteria. You can download the document itself and reach out directly to Dr. Austin for her incredible support. I also wanted to remind everyone as we move on from here that the exemplary statuses, myself and Pinellas included, these are some wonderful people to talk to. If you have questions, if you wanted to reach out about a website or you had an idea, everyone on here for the time that I've been fortunate to be in my role in Pinellas have been incredibly supportive, along with the governance and leadership of the task force. So I hope that you'll take some time to look at that, especially if you're not part of one of those districts, and freely reach out. I know we had some technical issues, but I wanted to highlight and reiterate the EverFi program that Matt shared with us. It's free. If your district uses single sign-in, it's likely already in your Clever, or whatever your single sign-on platform is. And so when you look at this, it's another chance, if you're not super familiar with EverFi, to connect with each of the lessons to see what's available. To see what's available and what each topic is going to cover and focus on. I wanted to also highlight, let me get my screen back. What I also wanted to highlight in the educational resources is that there's a wealth of resources that the task force has already curated for us as educators to be able to access and use and bring into our classrooms. One of the things that I always start with my teachers is the lesson plans that are available. They have them aligned from kindergarten up through grade 12. So if we go down to the bottom here and let's click on the last page, you'll be able to see that it goes from kindergarten through grade 12. As you develop resources, if you think about lessons and connect them to standards and the state statute, feel free to share them with the task force. Send them in and see if we can build this out more as a community. When I think about the resources and the lesson plans, if you were to go and read more about one, just at random, the Black Power movement for 9th through 12th grade, we heard that how important it can be to anchor the lessons in the standards, right? We heard that from our presentation on CPOMs. So we see here in this one lesson, we've got a connection to sociology, we've got a connection to American history. So you've got these resources in a similar format. Most of them follow the same format with additional resources for you to be able to keep connected. One of my favorites, if I go back for a minute, one of my favorite resources is the African American Museums page. And on this page, you get the chance to look through a wealth of different museums that have already been curated for us. If you were in Dr. Young's breakout session yesterday, he talked about how one of the effects of the pandemic was that museums started to archive their collections at a much more rapid pace. And so these museums become resources for primary sources to let the history speak for itself. If we're worried about that idea of indoctrination from HB7, we have the ability to go to these resources, physical museums, virtual museums, and we can pull resources together to help teach our curriculum, to teach this history. So I wanted to make sure that we highlight some of these resources so that we could see where it is that we're able to pull resources from. Oh, I lost my tab, I apologize. So please, if you find that there's an African-American museum in your community, in your area that isn't on this list, send this into the task force so that they can update it. Not only is this great for resources, and not every museum is going to have digitized their materials, but one of the things I always use for this is if I'm going to take a road trip with my family or I'm going to stay in a different city for a day, I come here and see if there might be something I can take advantage of as a learner and find out more information. Obviously, you can bookmark and you can and find any of these resources that we've talked about, but hopefully you will bookmark this page and use this as the hub for African American history in the state of Florida. Dr. Kelly, Sabrina, the other members of the task force and the governing body have done a wonderful job of updating this website. If you haven't been here in a while, it did undergo an update recently, and it is an amazing place for you to start if you're looking to build out resources, K-12 and regardless of your content area. As Dr. Kelly had mentioned before, don't be a stranger. So as you find things that you think are valuable for the larger community in the state of Florida to know and be aware of, please share those things. They've got the easy contact button for you to send that in. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen as a quick overview and say it was a wonderful presentation, a wonderful couple of days. And I look forward to collaborating with you all in the future. Anyone who's out there, anyone of the participants, please feel free to email me at any time. One of the things before we transition that I had seen pop up in the chat a few times was about a certificate or documentation for you to be able to get continuing education points. Obviously, every district is going to handle that process a little differently, but the task force does send you a certificate that you can then use to help get those continuing education credits. For example, in Pinellas, because of the status of the task force, any of the Pinellas teachers who are attending today, and I've seen your names pop up a few times, once you get that certificate, you forward that to me and send that to me, and then I will manually load you for the continuing education points that you can receive for attending this. And I know I had sent that out to mine. Every district might be a little bit different, so be sure you connect with whoever your, I would start with your social studies supervisor or manager, or if you've got a professional development department, to go there with that certificate. Just make sure you paid attention to which email address you use to sign up, because that's where that certificate is going to go. And you don't want to miss that certificate to be able to submit for the wonderful hours of PD that we've had over the last 2 days. Roxy, Dr. Kelly, Sabrina, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Thank you so much. And before you leave, I'd like to give him a snap as well. But Sabrina, I'd like for you to identify those guys who helped put this together. I went to the webpage, I didn't see the names. And I think it is worth it. It's like you got to give people flowers while they yet live. So there was an incredible group of people who helped put all of this together. And it was just not Dr. Kelly or Sabrina. We were just the fingers and the hands and the mouth to what these incredible guys put together. So I want to, Sabrina, if you have their names, just read the names, because it's good to hear the names of those who are part of this whole team that put this Summer Institute together.
Yes, indeed, Dr. Kelly. So I would like to give a heartfelt welcome and appreciation for the dedication and the passion for all of the planning committee members who took time out to help us put on this great event this year. That would be our Vice Chair, Dr. Samuel Wright, Dr. Brenda Walker, Dr. Michelle Gale from Leon County, Dr. Austin, our exemplary status coordinator, Tracy Oliver from Duval County and an exemplary member, Marie Rogers, Hillsborough County, an exemplary district, Aaron Conklin, Duval County, Dr. Darius Young from Florida A&M University, Matthew Story, Kathleen Ems from St. Lucie Public Schools, an exemplary district, Marion Williams from Broward County, an exemplary district. Dr. Sylvia Jackson, Gaston County, an exemplary district. Matthew Keurig, Everfi, Dr. Rim, Alachua County, exemplary district. Brian Knowles, Palm Beach County, an exemplary district. Matthew Bloom, Pinellas, an exemplary district. Dr. Andrea Oliver, Tallahassee Community College. And Dr. Sherilyn Scott, Miami-Dade, an exemplary district. And we must include our esteemed principal investigator, Dr. Kelly, Bernadette Kelly Brown, and to also include our chair, Tony Hill. So to all of you, thank you so much for putting your time and your passion to forming this great opportunity for us to witness and to be a part of. Thank you for your hard work and dedication. It can never be measured.
And thank you, Sabrina. You were just amazing. I mean, snap, clap, smiley face, whatever you all want to do, you know, give it to Sabrina. She jumped in the middle of this year and did a yeoman's job of getting this done. She had no experience in doing this kind of work with me before, but you know what? I'm not going to let her go. She's done a wonderful job. So please send her some love as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Roxy, and then Roxy will share with our last person to give us our closing remarks. Thank you, everyone. Kisses and love to each of you, and just keep the culture alive.
All right, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Sabrina. Thank you, Dr. Kelly. It has been our pleasure to, again, work with this amazing team. And so just remember, just like Mr. Bloom said, you're going to stay tuned to the that website. You're going to mark it as a in your favorite, so that that will be your primary source for information, African American history information in this state. Also, in the coming week, you will week or so, as we pull together information and recordings of all those things. We will definitely shoot out to you via your email and your app when everything is ready. The recordings will be ready, the different chat files and all of those, the information that we receive from the different speakers, all of those things will be uploaded into the app, the web app portal, which will be directly linked, Sabrina, to that amazing website that Dr. Kelly spoke of. And Mr. Bloom shared with us. I think who will give us the final remarks, it says Marion Will. This is Dr.
Sherilyn Scott.
Dr. Sherilyn Scott. All right, thank you, Dr. Scott.
So just 1 minute, just one moment. Okay, good. So good, everyone can hear me. So Marion is just like my sister, you know, we're directly next to each other in the districts. I just wanted to say, so I definitely feel wonderful in giving our closing remarks, but we have had an amazing time on today. And the task force, thank you for everyone that you highlighted, Sabrina. You did an amazing job. And to Dr. Kelly Brown, I mean, without it would just, she's been around every year. She tells us, this is my last year, but the same way that she's holding on to you, Sabrina, the same way we're going to hold on to her. So we're not through. Her work is not yet finished, but this is the ending and a culmination now of 2 days of just outstanding work. Dr. Samuel Wright, you see him, he's just like 2 snaps, 5 turnaround and all of that. And to our amazing participants, thank you for being actively engaged. Matthew Bloom, thank you for giving us a wonderful synopsis of all of the resources that our teachers will have the ability to use. We just had an amazing day today. I love listening to the history of the highwaymen and the artwork looking at, we've had so many speakers. I wanted to talk about the Groveland 4 that we had, because we've had them around. Well, we've had the book around, and we actually had Devin King, actually, Michael, that he actually spoke to us before. So we have just our connections are, and our roots run deep. You know, that we're truly the village that makes sure that this state, that we recognize African American history, that it is implemented through our K-12, your K-12 curriculum. And I know that our teachers will leave here with a wealth of information. If I could just clone each and every one of us, it will just be, I think that we can answer all questions throughout the entire state, but that's not possible just yet. And I wanted to highlight also the Civic Literacy Excellence Initiative. That was an amazing, just talking about the Gettysburg Address and the I Have a Dream speech. And Marion and her teachers that she highlighted and used those today to talk about CPOMs and connecting the standards. But more than anything, I want to make sure that our teachers leave here and they utilize the information and all of the things that we have shared with them today. Now, I'm piggybacking off of Dr. Kelly, because I went there too, as we were talking about that age of, you know, like, when Dr. Rahim and Brian Knowles talked today, I just didn't want to get up and start dancing or whatever. But, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed that, because I think it makes it relatable for our students, that is real life, you know. And, you know, so that age, so it just brought back so many memories. And the last one I wanted to talk about Matthew and Everfi, and Matthew spoke about that. Matthew Bloom spoke about it, but Matthew that works with Everfi has been instrumental in ensuring that our teachers are able to use the 306 curriculum, and making sure that, you know, that he continues to expand upon that information that is there for our teachers. Miami-Dade County Public Schools, we've been using it for quite some time, and it is really, it's excellent, it's really good. And we just want to make sure that we have for our teachers, our K through 12 teachers, that African American history is implemented in all areas, so that we will leave no stone unturned. So again, SNAP, all of that to Roxy. You all did an amazing job as usual. We appreciate it, you know. And one thing is, now next year will be even larger, because we'll actually have, I'm claiming it, that we're going to be face to face, and we'll still also do this hybrid if needed. But, you know, I look forward to seeing everyone. And Dr. Austin, thank you so much for summing everything up for us today. Just an amazing job. But I'm looking forward to see you all on face to face. And I mentioned earlier that we do have a director coming up at FAM that worked with us here in Dade County. So I know that there are going to be some great things going on between the connections with Florida A&M University, our Commissioner of Education, and everything that's going on. So hats off to everyone, and looking for some great things. And make sure that you get back to your school sites and share this information and turnkey it to our teachers and to our communities. So without that being said, Roxy, is there anything else? And Dr. Kelly Brown, with anything you would like to share?
I'm not sure if Dr. Kelly is ready, but again, I think she's said her closing remarks. And again, snap, everyone. This has been an amazing experience. You have been empowered to continue doing the amazing work. You know what? Snap. All right, we have Sabrina real quick here. Go ahead, Sabrina.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I just needed to add someone else. The invaluable contribution of Representative Geraldine Thompson.
Yes.
In our committee. She offered such wealth of information and keeping us informed what really mattered in planning our institute this go around. So I just could not end this without giving her accolades. So Representative Geraldine Thompson.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Sabrina. And with that being said, just each of you give yourselves a snap for deciding to spend this time to equip yourself with information and resources and tools to impact the lives of the families, the students, and the community stakeholders that your work touches, Dr. Austin. Is that right? And so the better we are, the more equipped and informed we are, the better the communities we serve, the students, the families, the districts. And you all are doing an amazing job in the state of Florida. We're doing an amazing job in the state of Florida. Again, thank you for your time. As you are leaving out, please remember all of the polls are still in the chat. In the app, it's super important that we take care of our polls. Dr. Oliver pulled all of that stuff together for us. And so we want to ensure that we make sure, because your input matters, as Dr. Scott was talking about next year and for years to come, we want to ensure that we are doing what we need. I would like to thank our VSC team as a whole, Camille, our tech staff, Yvonne Hawkins, and we just want to, again, thank you. And on your way out, what is your one word as you're leaving, Dr. Wright? Chat your one word as it relates to how you are feeling as a result of this experience that we've shared together the last 2 days. Let's go out and continue making the impact that we're making on the lives of students in the state of Florida.
Well, let me say,
and don't forget, we got to do our, we have the closing survey. We're going to make sure that we put that in the chat. That's going to also, we have a link to the closing survey that will be in the chat, Sabrina, right? It's also going to be in the app. It will be emailed to you. I think it's posted on the website. It's multiple places. It's multiple places. So just like we have the pre-institute survey, that post-overall survey matters as well. Dr. Wright, I think you have some closeout stuff. I see you, Dr.
well,
Wright.
let me just say that you used the vernacular riveting the other day, yesterday or either today, which was phenomenal, because this was, I just said that to the student success coaches when I read my students' manuscript, 30 before 30. Esco Dowley, he's a fellow from Dade County, and he finished school at USF, and then he worked in the district here for a while. When I read his manuscript and did his foreword, it was a riveting read. I could not put the book down. And that's the way this Summer Institute was. It was so interesting and exciting that once you logged in, it was difficult to log out. And so I want to say to those of you who were involved in this was, I'm telling you, we've had many good Summer Institutes, but I think this one is by far the one that went to the moon and back, and it didn't fall on deaf ears, because we have teachers who have been empowered, and I know that we're going to see some results in some of our classrooms as a result of what transpired these last 2 days. Unfortunately, our teachers needed a little bit more frequently than just the one Summer Institute, but that's why they could contact staff and go to the website to be refreshed. We all need to be refreshed and renewed so they could continue to make things happen. We must make history live in our classroom, because that is what's going to make the difference for our young people. And thank you so much for what you all continue to do. I was a blessed man by having a chance to travel to Senegal, Dakar, West Africa. I went to South Africa, and I went to Zimbabwe. I met Nelson Mandela. Those things have inspired me from that day, which was more than 20 years ago, to this day today, by those experiences I had in Africa. And I want you to know that you all were just phenomenal. All of you were just great. And I'm thankful that I can associate myself with a powerful organization like the Commission of Education's African American History Task Force.
So much, and on that, you all have an amazing day. Your one words on your way out, stay connected to the app, do all of those things.